What is going on, college basketball fans? Welcome back to another video. Today we are previewing every single team in the Big 12 Conference, looking at their starting lineup, their coach, if I think they're going to make the March Madness tournament or not, and we're going to rank them from worst to best based on how good I think they are going to be this upcoming college basketball season. We're doing this for every single Power 5 conference, so let me know which conference you guys want to see next, and yeah, guys, subscribe if you guys are new. Let's get it started. Okay, so the first team we're going to talk about today, and coming in here at number 16 on my preseason Big 12 rankings, we have the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, this may be a surprise because they were so good last year. They made March Madness last year, but they are losing pretty much all of their top production from last year. They are returning their head coach, Tad Boyle, who I think is a pretty good coach, but I just don't think they have the roster to do it because not only did they lose Cody Williams, KJ Simpson, Tristan Da Silva, and Eddie Lampkin, but they really did not target the transfer portal that hard, and the guys that they did get, I don't think are going to be that much of impact players. A lot of their starting lineup is going to be players that were on this Colorado team last year, but just didn't have that much playing time or didn't have that much production when they did get playing time. But this is what their starting lineup or projected starting lineup is going to look like this upcoming season. Guard Julian Hammond. You got another guard, Javon Ruffin. You got forward transfer from Washington State, Andrzej Jakomowski. You got forward Asan Diop and center Bangat Dak. Now, a lot of these guys, they only have one transfer in their projected starting lineup. A lot of these guys were on Colorado last year but did not have that much production. I just think this is going to be more of a retooling year. Some of these players on this Colorado team to improve, and it's going to be kind of a rebuild for them. And I think in this tough Big 12 conference, they're going to come in at number 16 on my preseason ranking. Coming in here at number 15 on my preseason rankings, I do have Oklahoma State. Now, Oklahoma State has a new head coach in Steve Lutz coming over from Western Kentucky, and I think that that will be good for them in the future. And they actually don't have too bad of a roster. They are losing Javon Small, who did enter the transfer portal, was a good scorer for them last year. He transferred over to West Virginia, but they do have a transfer from Central Florida at point guard in Sheamus Avery, and they do have another transfer guard from Arkansas in Devontae Davis, a.k.a. Devo Davis, who was a big-time player for Arkansas a couple of years ago, especially in the March Madness tournament, who has a ton of experience. They're bringing back another guy who has been at Oklahoma State for a few years now. He's a fifth-year senior in Bryce Thompson. They're bringing in a transfer from West Virginia and Pat Sumnick to play power forward, and they have a transfer from Xavier, Abu Usman from Xavier, who I think is going to be pretty decent for them. I think that their two best players are probably going to be Devo Davis and Bryce Thompson. I think that they can get a lot of production from them. And on their bench, they have a transfer from Western Kentucky coming with their head coach, Steve Lutz, Brandon Newman. And I think they have a pretty decent team. I just don't think they're going to be good enough to compete in the Big 12, and I don't think they're going to be good enough to make the March Madness tournament. I think Steve Lutz was a good hire, though. I just think it's going to take some time. A lot of transfers here. We'll see if they can put it all together and maybe surprise some people and try to sneak into the tournament, but I think they're going to be towards the bottom of the Big 12 Conference this year. Number 14, we do have the Utah Utes, and I don't think Utah's going to be that great this year. I'd be surprised if they finish top 10 in the Big 12 this year. But I don't think that they're horrible. I just think in Big 12 standards, they are just not up to par with the other teams. They're returning head coach Craig Smith, who I don't think is that bad, but I don't think he's that great either. They're bringing in a transfer point guard from Baylor in Miro Little. He didn't get that much burn on the court last year for the Baylor Bears, but he's only a sophomore, so he could have some potential there. At shooting guard, you got Gabe Matson. At the 3, you got transfer from San Francisco and Mike Shervance. At the 4, you got Ezra Usar from East Carolina. And at the center, you got Lawson Loverling. And on the bench, you got Mason Matson from Boston College that I believe could give you some decent production off the bench there as well. I don't think Utah has a horrible team. I don't think they're going to make the March Madness tournament. But I do believe they are a decent team. I think they're going to finish towards the bottom of the Big 12 this year. Coming in here at number 13, I do have the West Virginia Mountaineers. I think that this is a rebuilding year for West Virginia. They're bringing in a new head coach from Drake and Darian DeVries. I think he's going to be a good coach. He's already recruiting pretty decently here since he's got to West Virginia, and he's hit the portal hard because he's had to. They only have one returning player from last year's team, and this is the first of 3 Big 12 teams where I have their projecting starting 5 lineup as all transfer players. And at the point guard position, I got Javon Small, the transfer from Oklahoma State. We talked about Pat Subnick transferring to Oklahoma State earlier. It's almost like they made a trade, Javon Small for Pat Subnick. I would say West Virginia won that trade. At the shooting guard position, they have Sincere Harris, a transfer from Illinois. Only a sophomore. I think that he is going to be pretty good for the West Virginia Mountaineers. At the small forward position, we got a transfer from UIC, and that is Toby Akani. He's a pretty good shooter. Actually went to the Mountaineers charity exhibition game against the D2 team. He was shooting lights out in that charity game. They looked pretty good, but of course, playing a D2 team is going to be a lot different than a Big 12 team. And at the 4, I do have them starting Tucker DeVries, which is Darian DeVries' son, and he is the Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year from last year. Very good. I have him as the 4 position, but WVU is going to be playing small ball, and he is going to bring the ball down for them quite a bit this season. He is more of a point forward type player, but I have him in here as the 4 for the projected starting lineup. He is a transfer from Drake. And at the center position, like I said, they are playing small ball. He is kind of an undersized 5, but he is a forward, and that is Amani Hansberry, another transfer from Illinois, who is also a sophomore. He actually plays pretty good for being an undersized big. The only problem I see is maybe he's not that good of a rebounder, but I think that he is going to give them some good production because he can shoot it as well. So having that stretch 5 with a small ball lineup is going to help the West Virginia Mountaineers a lot this year. I don't think they're going to make March Madness this year, but a lot like these other teams that I talked about, like Colorado, I think WVU is more in a rebuild year, and Darian DeVries is getting his first season in the Big 12. It's going to take some time, but I think he is the right guy there for the job. In here at number 12, maybe a shocker that they are this low, but I do have the TCU Horned Frogs. They've been really good the past few years in the Big 12, making the tournament and playing really good under head coach Jamie Dixon, who has really built up this TCU program. I think that they are more in a retooling kind of year, although they are the second of 3 teams, like I mentioned WVU just a minute ago. They are another one of those teams where their entire projected starting 5 are going to be transfers, and we'll see if they all can come together. They could be a surprise team in the Big 12 if they are good, but I think TCU is going to have kind of a retool year this season. At the point guard position, they have transfer from Arizona State and Frankie Collins. I think that he is a pretty good scorer. He's a veteran presence here on this team, and he is going to be pretty good for them. At a shooting guard position, they do have Brendan Wenzel, a transfer from Wyoming. At the 3, I do have them starting Noah Reynolds. He was a 20-point per game scorer at Green Bay last year. I think that he could be a really good wing in the Big 12 this year and an underrated player. At the power forward position, I have them starting Trazarian White from UNC Wilmington. He is another 19-point per game scorer that they are getting out of the portal this season. We saw what a guy like Dalton Connett could do coming from Northern Colorado, going to Tennessee, averaging over 20 points per game in the SEC last year. Who is going to be that player that is going to come from a small school, play at a Power 5 conference, and be a National Player of the Year contender? Could it be Trazarian White from UNC Wilmington? They were pretty good last year. He's a 20-point per game scorer. We'll see. I think that they have some players who could be surprise players in the Big 12 that could help propel TCU up a couple of spots here. And at the center, I do have them starting Ernest Uday, the transfer from Kansas. he was a top recruit, but we'll see if he pans out. He hasn't really panned out so far, but this could be a big breakout year for Ernest Udeh. Their key losses this year, Jameer Nelson Jr. and Emmanuel Miller, two really good players for them last season. We'll see if they can make the tournament, but for now, I am going to predict that they will not make it this year, and this will be more of a retooling year, but who knows, if they can have a couple of breakout players, they could jump a few spots and sneak into the tournament. This up coming in here at number 11, and I actually really like this team. They are just very, very young, but if their young players can play to the level that they're expected, it wouldn't surprise me too much if they would jump a few spots, and that is Arizona State. And they are coached by Bobby Hurley, brother of UConn head coach Dan Hurley, and he got busy in the recruiting process this year. I mean, a lot of this team is young, but some really good players that he got out of high school this year. At the point guard position, they do have Alston Mason, the transfer from Missouri State. He was a really good player for Missouri State last year, so that will bring a little bit of veteran presence on this Arizona State team. At the shooting guard position, they are going to be starting Adam Miller. I think that he's going to be pretty decent for them as well. At the 3, I have them starting 4-star freshman Jason Sannon, and I hope that I'm pronouncing that name right, but he's a pretty good freshman that Bobby Hurley was able to pull. We'll see if they start him, but I have them projected to start him at the 3. And at the 4, I have them starting B.J. Freeman, a transfer from Milwaukee. He was a 21-point-per-game scorer last year, and he is going to get a chance to play some Big 12 basketball this year. I think he could be pretty good for them. And at the center, this was Bobby Hurley's big get out of high school this year, Jaden Quaitons. And he is a 5-star freshman, top 10 recruit that Bobby Hurley was able to get this year. And I think he's going to start at the center for them. Big expectations for him. If he can pan out, he could help Arizona State jump up a few spots and maybe make the March Madness tournament this year. Right now, I'm going to have them just outside the tournament. I think they're maybe going to be an NIT team. I just think that they're a little bit too young at this point. But Bobby Hurley was getting busy in the recruiting trail this year, and he has a young team, and I think he has Arizona State on the right track. Coming in here at number 10, we do have Central Florida, and Central Florida is probably my most borderline team when it comes to whether I think they're going to make March Madness or miss it. I think that they are going to be right on the outside, maybe first 4 out, next 4 out. They're going to be right there. But they have a very interesting team. They're returning a really good backcourt in Darius Johnson and Jalen Sellers, also returning their head coach in Johnny Dawkins. But these two guys, Darius Johnson and Jalen Sellers, very good backcourt, good scorers. That is some really good returning production that they are going to need some veteran guards in this Big 12 conference. They are also bringing in transfer guard Mikey Williams, who committed to Memphis. Now he had some troubles with the law, got arrested, and now he's transferring over to Central Florida to play for Johnny Dawkins. And Mikey Williams is the big X factor on the Central Florida team. Is he going to be the big-time recruit that we all thought he was going to be when he originally committed to Memphis, or is he not going to be playing that great? Is he going to be focused on basketball? We will see, but he was the big-time X factor for the Central Florida team, and I have him projected starting at the 3 as a 3-guard lineup, and at the 4, I have them starting Keyshawn Hall, transfer from George Mason, and at the center, I have them starting 4-star freshman, 7'1", Mustafa Taim. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right as well. Trying my best with some of these names, but he is a 4-star recruit, top 50 recruit that Johnny Dawkins got on this team. I think he's going to start at the center position. And they also have a couple good bench players in Dior Johnson out of the JUCO transfer, and Benny Williams transfer from Syracuse. So Central Florida, I have them as like a first 4 team out, or the next 4 teams out. I think just outside of the tournament, but very easily, especially depending on the play of these three guards. I think Darius Johnson, Jalen Sellers are going to be very great for them. If Mikey Williams can step up and be the guy we thought he was, I think Central Florida is going to make the tournament this season. And here at number 9, I do have Kansas State. And this is the first team that I'm going to have in the March Madness tournament. So from here on out, every team I have ranked above Kansas State, I have them making March Madness. So I'm going to have 9 teams make it out of the Big 12 this year. It's the best conference in college basketball. I would expect at least 8 teams to probably make it. I'm going to have 9 predicted in the preseason. Kansas State, the third team out of 3 teams in the Big 12 that I have projecting, starting all 5 transfers. And they got some really good transfers. And Kansas State is an interesting team. Obviously returning coach Jerome Tang for year 3 here with Kansas State. Really good coach. I like him a lot. He always hits the portal hard, and he did that this year. And they're an interesting team because they're going to play bigger. I mentioned a few teams earlier that are going to be playing small ball in the Big 12. Kansas State's going to be starting 3 guys, I think, that are going to be above 6'8", 6'9" on this team. And their starting point guard is that undersized center that Jerome Tang loves to start. And that's Doug McDaniel, a transfer from Michigan. I think that he is going to be able to score a lot this year. He is going to be a really good shooter. Jerome Tang loves to have a scoring point guard. I think Doug McDaniel fits that role really well. Shooting guard, Brendan Hassan, transfer from Villanova. We'll see if he can take a step up this year. He wasn't too great last year, but I think in the right system, he could definitely be pretty good. At the forward, at the 3 position, I have them starting the transfer from Illinois, Coleman Hawkins. He played the 4 or the 5 sometimes for Illinois across the course of his career, and I have him projected to start at the 3. He could probably swap with the 4, actually, as I am looking at this now, and we'll talk about the 4 that I have starting, and that is Akor. I feel like Akor, the transfer from Samford, who was really good for the Samford team last year that made the tournament. I think that he could play the 3. Coleman Hawkins can play the 4. You can kind of switch them out. But if Coleman Hawkins can improve his 3-point shot, I think that he could definitely start at the 3 as well. But yeah, both these guys around 6'8", 6'9", they are going to have a pretty good size starting lineup on this team. And at the center, they have transferred from Kentucky, shot blocking machine Ugana Nsu. I think I'm pronouncing his name right, but he is a great shot blocker, great defender. He's going to be the anchor of this team. And yeah, Kansas State, team of transfers, but looking pretty good. And not to mention, with their size and their starting lineup, their 2 key bench players is David Ngusman and also Bay Fall, which are 2 guys. Bay Falls over 7 foot, and Ngusen is a forward, so they have a lot of size on this team, and I think that if they can use that to their advantage, and maybe Coleman Hawkins, Doug McDaniel can kind of get the shooting starting on this team. I know Doug McDaniel will, but Coleman Hawkins kind of an X factor when it comes to shooting the 3 ball. If he can knock it down, I feel like this team can be pretty good. We'll just see if they can get the shooting down, but this is the first team I have making the March Madness tournament, probably as a lower seed, coming in here as my 9th preseason ranked Big 12 team. Number 8 might come to a surprise for you guys that I do have them above some of these other teams like Kansas State or Central Florida because they lost a couple players and they did lose their head coach in Mark Pope to Kentucky this year, but that is BYU, and I still have them making the tournament this year with their new head coach Kevin Young, and really they have a pretty solid team. They got point guard Dallin Hall, shooting guard Trevin Nell. At the 3, I have them starting Igor Demon, a 5-star top 10 prospect out of high school this year. He's going to be 5-star freshman for them. I think Igor Demon can be really good for this BYU team in year 1 and be an impactful freshman. They have a transfer at the forward position in Maywat Mag from Rutgers, and at the center position they have Fusini Traore. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but he can be a pretty good center for them as well. And they have a backup, Kiba Kieta, transfer from Utah, who is another good center for them. Their key losses, of course, Jackson Robinson that went to Kentucky with Mark Pope, who was a really good player for them last year and a key to them making the tournament last season. But I think that this BYU team is still really good. I have them as the 8th best team heading into the season in the Big 12, and I think they're going to make March Madness. 7, I do have the Texas Tech Red Raiders, coached by Grant McCasland. I believe this is year 2 of Grant McCasland's time here in Texas Tech. And I think that they have a pretty solid team here and some good depth as well. At the point guard position, they have Elijah Hawkins, a transfer from Minnesota. He is a really good, underrated playmaker that can bring a lot to this offense, especially passing the ball here for Texas Tech. At the shooting guard position, they have Chance McMillan, returning guard there for the Red Raiders. At the forward position, they have Darian Williams. I think that he is going to be pretty good for them this year and maybe take a big step up. Their big-time transfer that they got this year was JT Toppin out of New Mexico. He had 2 years at New Mexico, was really good for the Lobos. Now he's heading over to Texas Tech, and I think he is going to be a really good newcomer here in the Big 12. And at the center position, they do have transfer from Pitt, Federico, who is a big center, who is going to get some boards, be able to play some defense for them, catch some lobs. He is going to be, hopefully, take a big step up from last year for this Red Raiders team. And I think that they have a key player off the bench in Kevin Overton. I think that he is going to be an underrated newcomer to the Big 12, coming off the bench, transfer from Drake. He was only a freshman last year, but gave Drake some key minutes when they made their run to March Madness last year. And I think this Texas Tech team is going to be pretty good. They have some key losses in Pop Isaacs and Joe Toussaint, but I think Pop Isaacs, he went over to Creighton. I think Pop Isaac was pretty inefficient last year, and you're replacing him with a guy like Elijah Hawkins, who is a better playmaker. Not as good as a scorer or a shooter, but probably going to be more efficient and a better playmaker getting his teammates the ball. So I don't believe that is really that great of a loss there. But I think Texas Tech will make March Madness this year. I'm coming in here at number 7 on the Big 12 preseason rankings. Coming in here at number 6, I do have Cincinnati. Cincinnati, at this point, I feel like 6 and above, I feel like these teams are comfortably probably going to make March Madness this year at the very least. But they have their head coach, Wes Miller, and they have a really good lineup this season. Actually, in their exhibition game, they just beat Ohio State by 20 points. I'm very excited for the Cincinnati team to hopefully get back to March Madness this year. I feel like they're comfortably probably going to make it this year, and I'm excited for this Bearcats team. So at the point guard position, they have Day Thomas, returning guard there for them, and that's kind of a reoccurring theme here. One of the teams in the Big 12 that actually have a lot of returning players from last season, and Day Thomas going to be a really good point guard in the Big 12 this year. At the shooting guard position, I have them starting Simus Asias. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Not great at pronouncing names, but I know these players, and he is a really good player for them. At the 3 position, I have them starting Dan Skillings. And at the 4 transfer, their big-time transfer that they got this year, which I think is going to be so huge, is Dylan Mitchell out of Texas. Dylan Mitchell was a former 5-star recruit. He played 2 years at Texas, never really had that breakout season, but he is an athletic freak at the forward position, and not the best shooter, but if he could shoot the ball, he would be outstanding. But super athletic player. He's going to be able to catch lobs, going to be a good rebounding forward, be able to play defense, and just be one of the best slashers in this league. And that was a huge get, I think, for the Cincinnati team. And at the center position, you have a great defender, great shot blocker, and Aziz Badango. And also, they have some good players off the bench. I actually think that this sophomore guard, Jizzle James, might be a starter. He's not in my projected starting lineup, but he's been playing great so far for them in the preseason and in the exhibition game. I think Jizzle James might be a starter this year for Cincinnati. He's a really good player, but either way, whether it's him or maybe Dan Skillings, I think they're going to have an awesome 6-man on the Cincinnati team. At number 5, I do have the Arizona Wildcats, Returning their head coach, of course, and Tommy Lloyd. They are a preseason top 10 team in the rankings this year, and you can definitely see why. They are returning their star backcourt in Jaden Bradley and Caleb Love. At the 3 position, they have KJ Lewis returning, who is going to be starting for them this year. At the forward, they got their big-time transfer pickup in Trey Townsend from Oakland, the guy who was tearing it up for Oakland last year in March Madness. He transfers over to Arizona. And at the center position, they are losing Umar Ballo, so they are going to be starting Matijas Krivas. Hopefully can fill some of that role, especially rebounding-wise, that Umar Ballo left behind. And on the bench, I do have them bringing in Carter Bryant off the bench. Now, I think that there are definitely some question marks for this Arizona team. I'm not so completely sold that they are going to be a top 10 team this year. I think they're definitely going to make March Madness. I think Caleb Love is one of the better scorers in college basketball and one of the better shooters. I think Trey Townsend is going to take that step up that he needs to play Big 12 basketball. I just think this team has a lot of question marks. I don't think that they are better than the other 4 teams I have ranked here in the Big 12, but comfortably going to make March Madness. And I think they are definitely a top 20 team. I'm just not so sure about a top 10 team. Next up, coming in here at number 4, I do have the Baylor Bears. Of course, coached by legendary future Hall of Fame coach Scott Drew. And they have a very fun team this year that I think is going to gel really nicely together. At the point guard position, they have Jeremy Roach, transfer from Duke, who is a veteran point guard who can score the rock, play make, just a nice veteran guard presence to have on this team that has a lot of young guards coming in. And that includes my starting projected shooting guard for them, 5-star point guard Rob Wright. Now, Rob Wright is that next guy in line that Scott Drew has been bringing in, a 5-star point guard like every year and sending them to the NBA draft the very next year. I think Rob Wright is going to step right in and be able to give that production that Scott Drew loves to have from these freshman guards. Another guard, Jaden Nunn at the 3, returning. The best teams in the Big 12 this year are all returning a lot of guys that they had from last year. And a lot of teams in the middle, and really the bottom of the Big 12 as well, are bringing in a ton of transfers. I think returning talent is huge. Returning production is massive. And that kind of shows here in these rankings. But yeah, Jaden Nunn, Langston Love, 4 guard starting lineup for the Baylor Bears this year, and a lot of returning talent. I think that is going to be huge for Baylor this year. And at the 5, I do have them starting their big-time transfer portal pickup. Not just Jeremy Roach that they get this year, but Norchad Omier out of Miami. Played a huge role in Miami's Final Four run a few years ago, and just a great rebounder. Even though he is somewhat undersized for a center, he is an amazing rebounder, and he can score down low as well. I think that he is going to be amazing in a Scott Drew offense, and yeah, this team is looking really good. And off the bench, you have another 5-star recruit in VJ Edgecombe, another 5-star guard that is just going to be huge for them. This Baylor team is looking really good. I think they're a top 10 team in the country, and definitely going to make March Madness this year. Number 3 in the Big 12, I do have Iowa State. Iowa State returning a lot of great players from last year's team that was a 2 seed in March Madness. And they are, of course, returning their head coach, TJ Otzelberger, and returning their star point guard, Tamin Lipsey, who is a great playmaker, good scorer. Also returning Kashawn Gilbert at the 2. At the 3, Curtis Jones returning. And at the 4, they had their star freshman, Milan Momcilovic, who is returning as well, who a lot of people were saying, you know, he's a good shooter. He's good in the post. He's good at these fadeaway shots. I'm excited to see if he takes a big step up this year and really turns into a star in the Big 12 Conference. Very excited to see his leap from last year to this year. And at the center, they have their transfer in Deshaun Jackson from Charlotte. I think that he could be really good for them. And off the bench, they have JT Rock, who is another 7'1" center. I think him, JT Rock, and Deshaun Jackson, they can split minutes a lot and give them a lot of good production there as a group, as a unit there. With the boards and just give TJ Otzelberger some good minutes. I think Iowa State, probably a top 5 team in the country, comfortably a top 10 team in the country. I think that with all the returning talent that they have on this team and the leaps that these guys could make, could skyrocket them up to possibly a 1 or 2 seed once again this season in March Madness. Number 2 in the Big 12, I do have the Houston Cougars, and Houston just returning a lot of these gritty defenders that they had last year, and it's hard to rank them any lower than 3 or 4, but I think that they are the number 2 team in the Big 12 coming into this season. Obviously returning Hall of Fame coach Kelvin Sampson, and they are losing their star point guard in Jamal Shed, but they're replacing him with Milos Uzan, the transfer from Oklahoma. I don't think he's going to be as good as Jamal Shed, but he can, replace some of that production for you there. They also are returning their shooting guard, LJ Cryer, who has been really good for them, but I think that he can take that next step and become a elite scorer in this league. I think if he can do that, Houston is going to be very dangerous this season. At the 3, they do have Emmanuel Sharp returning. He is another guy who could take a big step this year for the Cougars. At the forward position, you have Francis, and at the 5, you have Juwan Roberts, 2 guys who are gritty defenders down low, gritty forwards who are going to be able to slash to the basket, get some post shots, and just amazing defenders. I mean, that's what Kelvin Sampson loves on these teams, and I think that this team, with all the returning guys that it has, replacing who could take a big step up this year, I think the key X factor is going to be Emmanuel Sharp. If he can take a huge step up this year, this Houston team is going to be very dangerous. Up at number 1, you guys know who it is. It is the Kansas Jayhawks, obviously coached by Hall of Fame coach Bill Self, and they are preseason number 1 team in the country. Not just in the Big 12, but in all of college basketball this year. They have an insane team, returning players. They got some of the top transfers this year. They got 5-star recruits coming in. This team is deep. This team is loaded. This has a ton of returning talent. I mean, it has everything you need to win a national championship in college basketball if they can put it all together this year. And at the point guard position, they have DeJuan Harris. We all know DeJuan Harris Jr. is one of the best playmakers in college basketball, and he can also shoot as well. He doesn't choose to shoot very often, but when he does decide to shoot, he can usually knock it down. But he is a pass-first point guard who is going to get you 6, 7, 8 assists a game and really just feed his teammates. And that is going to be key because they are bringing in the top transfer in the country, transfer from Wisconsin, AJ Storr, who played point guard for Wisconsin last year, but he is going to be playing shooting guard this year, which I think might actually be a better role for him. He can focus more on slashing to the basket, playing off ball, and being that scorer for this Kansas team. And I think AJ Storr is going to be an outstanding player this year. They got another transfer in Rylan Griffin from Alabama. He was a starting wing for the Alabama Crimson Tide last year that made the Final Four. He is an excellent shooter that is going to be key for this Kansas team to be able to kick out to the corner or to the wing for some three-point shots at some big-time moments. At the power forward position, they have returning KJ Adams Jr., a guy who plays very tough, rebounds really well, plays down low, and yeah, really good player returning there for the Jayhawks. And at the center position, they have the top transfer from last year from Michigan, but returning to Kansas this year again, Hunter Dickinson, a stretch 5 center who can rebound. He always sort of reminds me of like a Marc Gasol type of player who, can rebound down low, but can also shoot the 3 ball in the corner or at the top of the key. And that is going to be huge there for Kansas. He is a very good center. I know a lot of people hate on him, but he is a really good player. there for Kansas. And off the bench, you got guys like Zeke Mayo, who was a 20-point per game scorer at South Dakota State last year, transfer guard coming in off the bench, and another guy coming off the bench who is a 5-star center in Flory Badunga, who can give you some production off the bench at the center position. They do have some losses in Nick Timberlake, Kevin McCullough, and Johnny Furphy, but honestly, they could miss a guy like Kevin McCullough. I think if they were able to return him this year, that would be, way too overpowered, but still, preseason number 1 team in the country for the AP and myself, and I have them as the number 1 team here in the Big 12 this season. So let me know who you guys think. Know what you guys think about these Big 12 teams. Who you guys think is the best team in the Big 12 this year? And if one of these teams are your favorite team and you have some more information you want to give me about them, let me know down below in the comments. I will happily learn more about these teams. We're doing this for every single Power 5 conference, so let me know which conference you guys want to see next. Make sure you guys subscribe for more college basketball content. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching.